I really am serious. And I hope to hang on to it for a while.
That's it.
Inshallah, yeah. Allah yahyina. And you know, I think we can go to sleep now. Now we have this old young generation.
Yeah.
No, but really, right? I mean, I feel so happy that because there was a time when Somali studies was really in crisis because the country was in crisis. Yes, they are amazing. They really are amazing. And not all papers will even be good, but they have the idea of theory and Somali so far. And
I don't
many of them
have-
actually work with things when they're still young.
We're about to begin. Does everyone, some people, maybe you can sit up if you'd like, move forward. Sit at the table, don't be afraid. Cool. Are you guys all? Yeah. Okay. So this is the closing roundtable. What I'll do is just go through everyone's bios. What we've asked is for each person to have about 5 minutes for remarks, to just kind of reflect on what we've done for the last 2 days, to think a bit about the debates that have taken place in Somali studies over the last year that, of course, led to this workshop, to think about future directions and ideas, you know, if they had specific panels or papers perhaps that interested them that they want to comment on, they're free to do that as well. But really thinking now, not only in terms of the past for Somali studies, but also the future directions that we could take this, given the momentum that we've built up. So what I'll do is do some of the introductions. We also have Hussein Adam, who joined us, who I did not even realize was going to be here, but we're thrilled that he is and came yesterday as well. Really one of the fathers of Somali studies and Harvard PhD graduate. What year? It's in 1974, PhD here. Yeah, and one of the founding members, and Ali Jimale will give a few words of introduction before he speaks. But what I'll do is introduce everyone else. So Siham Rayale, academic research currently centers on the intersection of feminist security studies and post-conflict reconstruction in the Horn of Africa. She has in the past conducted qualitative and quantitative research on women's active participation in peace processes and political institutions. Her PhD work focused on the use of Somaliland women's narratives to impact the ways we conceptualize political spaces and subjectivities. She's written op-eds for Open Democracy, LSE Africa, and Oxfam blogs. Siham received her PhD at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She received her MA from York University in International Development Studies and her BA in Political Science from the University of Toronto. So doing this, let's do it in order, actually. Lee Cassanelli is professor of history and former director of the Africa Center at the University of Pennsylvania, where he teaches African history and world history. He is author of The Shaping of Somali Society, 1600 to 1900, and co-editor of The Struggle for Land in Southern Somalia. The Rift Valley Institute has recently published his Hosts and Guests, a historical interpretation of land conflicts in southern and central Somalia. Dr. Cassanelli is general editor of the journal Northeast African Studies and is a contributing editor for Bildan, an international journal of Somali studies. Next, so Hussein Adam's going to be introduced a little bit after, but let's go right to Ali Jimale Ahmed. He's a professor and chair of comparative literature at Queens College at the City University of New York, where he teaches for the Africana Studies program in the Department of Classical, Middle Eastern, and Asian Languages and Cultures. He's also on the comparative literature faculty at the CUNY Graduate Center. His books, some of which have been adopted for courses in universities around the world, include The Invention of Somalia, Daybreak is Near, Literature's Clan, and the Nation State in Somalia, Fear is a Cow, Diaspora Blues, The Road Less Traveled, Reflections on the Literatures of the Horn of Africa, and When Donkeys Give Birth to Calves, Totems, Wars, Horizons, Diasporas. His poetry and short stories have been translated into several languages, including Japanese, Danish, Portuguese, Turkish, and the languages spoken in the former Yugoslavia. Lidwien Kapteijns is Kendall Hodder Professor of History and teaches African and Middle Eastern History at Wellesley College. Educated in the Netherlands, she studied Somali language and literature under B.W. Andrzejewski during an MA in the study of Africa at SOAS. Before turning to Somali studies in late 1988, she lived and worked in the Sudan and published about late pre-colonial Sudanese history. Her 1999 book, Women's Voices in a Man's World, Women and the Pastoral Tradition in Northern Somali Orature, 1899 to 1980, with Mariam Ali, deals with notions of proper womanhood in Somali folklore texts and in the Somali popular songs of the 1960s and to 1980s. Clan Cleansing in Somalia, The Ruinous Legacy of 1991, an analysis of Somali Civil War violence in text and context, came out with the University of Pennsylvania Press in 2013, paperback in 2014. And finally, Fowsia Abdulkadir is currently a doctoral student at the School of Canadian Studies, Carleton University, Ottawa, specializing in political economy and gender and women's studies. Fowsia has her master's degree in social work, concentrating in Canadian public policy. As well, she holds 2 undergraduate degrees, a BA in economics and a Bachelor of Social Work, and a graduate certificate of teaching English as a second language. So what we'll do now is have Ali Jimale introduce Hussein Adam, who will start us off with his reflections on the workshop.
Thank you, Safia. Professor Hussein Mohamed Adam is, as I said last time, in fact, yesterday. And I was sort of really surprised when I saw him. You could really tell. I was genuinely surprised because I was not expecting him to be there. Professor Hussein is the founder of Somali Studies International Conference. He's the father, literally, the progenitor, literally. Hussein, for me, he has always been, he was my professor at La Folle, and I took several classes with him. And I still remember going to his house, which was on campus at the time. And I still remember, I don't know if Hussein, he had this caption from George Bernard Shaw, where it said, some people see things and ask how. I imagine things and ask why not. That's what he had in his house in those days. And this is, I'm talking about, you were not even born when I'm talking about. Hussein got his BA from Princeton and his MA from Makerere University. And he studied under the late Professor Ali Mazrui, Coleman, I think, and so on and so on, and got his PhD, as you just heard from Safia, from this great institution. Hussein has, in Somalia, the amazing thing is really what he did was, it was the first time in Somalia that international scholars were brought to Somalia, like Walter Rodney. You must have heard of how Europe underdeveloped Africa. George Lamin, who is still alive, The Pleasures of Exile and the Caribbean. Hussein brought those people to us at a time when we did not really know what was going on in the outside, on the outside world, basically. And what he also did was he founded several newspapers and several journals in Somalia in those days. Several, actually. Helgen at one point, Hagen, which was the only English weekly, actually, in Mogadishu in those days. Hussein founded those newspapers and gave them guidance. But he also, because he did his dissertation on Frantz Fanon, and you'll find it in this institution, a 2-volume dissertation that we are talking about here. And I remember we had Frantz Fanon symposium in Mogadishu in, it was 79, I think, or 80, thereabouts. 79, right. Now, Professor Hussein, of course, because he is the father and the doyen, really, of Somali studies, has written, edited, published books that are too numerous to really count. if you think in terms of all the proceedings of Somali international studies, all of them, here you are talking about, he was the publisher, he was the editor, of course, with Charlie, I think at one point, the chapter. Yeah, and he has one of the books, in fact, is available. I think I saw it here, Mending Ribs in the Sky. No, I saw it a little bit before. You have it?
No, I have it at home.
Yeah.
It's right there. Yeah.
Yes,
there.
that's the Mending Ribs in the Sky, which in a way really translates what we are sort of really trying to do here, in the sense that, of course, it's gendered, the proverb itself. You have to remember.
Thank you.
No, it is. And it came via a great intellectual, the late Mohamed Aden Sheikh, who was really an amazing intellectual. He was graduated from Italy under the tutelage at times of Partito Comunista Italiano and the socialists and all that sort of thing. And he was the one with Hussein who introduced us to the ideas of Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, and those other really great thinkers. So the proverb comes through Muhammad, God bless his soul, and it says, "Rakta shabay, exactly." So mending ribs, that people, when they pool their resources, actually, when they come together, they can even, the proverb says, they could go even to the sky and mend the ribs in the sky. Imagine here we are talking about before Gagarin and for people going to space, that sort of thing. Now, Hussein has also, the book, the one that's published by Kazan.
Yeah. Mending.
No, the other one.
The other one is War Destroys Peace.
Nurtures, exactly. So that is Hussein. There is always much to say about Hussein, and I'm always really humbled by his presence, really.
My reflections will be on the process of Somali studies, not the results or anything. And they won't be theoretical, they will be mostly descriptive. I must start by congratulating Safia for pulling this wonderful symposium and for the brilliant papers that were produced here. My first advice would be, even if you don't have the funds to publish the papers, because for the publications we made, they required minimum $5,000. So you can, and that's the area you are good, me and Ali are not good, and that is digital and technical and so on. I see you talking to somebody in Abu Dhabi. I've never, this is beyond my imagination. So you can put them all in digital. Annotated them that Somali Studies Symposium or Conference, Harvard University, the date, proceedings, and leave them here. Because what we're having now is more and more people in the diaspora are coming, the young scholars who are even coming, they'll be able to have access to them, because it may not be possible to publish most of them. So the main argument I'm making is that this symposium is part of a movement. It's not an isolated, once in a while kind of event. The African Somali Studies Association was formed in 1978 in Baltimore as part of the African Studies Association, which most of us were members. So we met through it and formed it. Among the founders, apart from myself, there is Lee Cassanelli, Charles Geschekter, the late brilliant Said Samatar, Ali Abdurrahman, Ali Jimale.
No, I was in diapers at the time.
But you were honorary. We knew you were coming.
Yeah. Okay, you and Lidwien, I'll put in the second layer because you joined later. You joined later the movement. Its major tasks have been first pulling through congresses every 3 years, but there were times we couldn't do it every 3 years, so we did it up to 5 years. So that was one. The second one is formation of symposiums and seminars. Now here, the Somali Studies as such did not do it. Other people did it, and we came and blessed them. we took credit. It's like we are now taking credit for Safia and her team's effort. So that is another task, and help to connect them. Sometimes a whole extraordinary Congress has been called, like by the comrades in Finland in 1999, and we included in our reports that the extraordinary Congress has been reported. Don't forget, Finland this year pulled a normal Congress, so they've done it twice. Then we have publications. As I said, you have got the first Congress edited by Geschekter and myself, a huge volume. At that time, we were ambitious. You have not only social sciences and culture, but you have even science and technology articles in that volume. The publications were also held for the Congress of '93. That's the book you just saw. They were held by the Congress held in Djibouti together with Ohio. That was the 10th anniversary Congress held in the two cities. They pulled through a publication. There was a publication pulled through by the Congress held in Rome by the great Anarita Puglieli. The Congress held in Hargeisa was the one that put the one on war destroying and peace nurturing. As I said, it's very important to publish or to have access in digital for publication, because we're spending a lot of time traveling, putting money and so on. And if nothing happens after that, and there's no record, it will be a shame for the future generations. Another task of Somali Studies, which is done by blessing, is a formation of journals. Already mentioned, there's a journal by Ahmed Samatar Bildan. There is a journal by the late Said Samatar, Journal of Somali Studies. There's a Northeast African journal. Those again are efforts we recognize.
Don't forget mine.
Oh.
Journal of Somali Studies. You are on the advisory board.
I am getting old. No, but I'm getting old. I've just retired from the college in December, and I think I've retired a mind in December. The Congress have produced many things. We have produced, finally, in 1993, at Holy Cross, we produced for the first time, women came to be 50% of the Congress. Here, they are 90%, which is wonderful. Then diaspora was a small part of the Congress in Rome, Rome. But then diaspora have come to dominate, as you can see in this Congress. There is, to cut it short, because this is a concluding session, I just wanted to give you a historical context of Somali studies. You have now, the last 3 congresses were held in Scandinavia, in Denmark, in Norway, and in Finland. We always try to hold a Congress in the Horn, if possible. 2 congresses were held in North America, in Toronto, Canada, and in the United States at my college, College of the Holy Cross. The College Holy Cross Congress was very important because when the Somali government fell, we used to get some money from the Somali government for the association. And then when the government fell, it looked empty. What can we do? So we had to struggle to move from a state-helped or sponsored association to a civil society association. The Congress at Holy Cross, the funds were raised by Holy Cross itself, which was celebrating its 150-year anniversary. They were raised by Canada, about 20,000 we got from Canada. In fact, some mostly from trade unions and from other groups in the United States. This one is an example of the civil society, because I'm sure Safia talked to the college, wrote a project proposals to get some funding for this conference, which is now what we have to defend. The congresses in the Scandinavia, they do get some funding from their government. So there is the Somali Studies movement, for which this symposium is not isolated, is part and parcel of that movement. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thanks. Just let me wrap up one follow up with Hussein, that we just heard that Hargeisa will host the next SSIA, as far as we can, and the date is already set for 4th to 6th August 2018. So we are going back to the Horn. We're going back to the Horn, and I think it's to the credit of the Red Sea Cultural Foundation. There are co-sponsors. Djibouti is going to co-sponsor. We're trying to, as far as I can understand, I'm not on the, didn't make the proposal, but they'd like to involve Jijiga University and right across the border, and then Puntland and Garowe and Mogadishu, we hope. So we hope it will be really an inclusive regional one. If you give me your email list, I will send out the announcement of that. It's just basically an acceptance of the proposal by the planners in Hargeisa to do this. So I think it's a nice idea, and we're really looking forward to seeing all of you there, I hope. And it'll give a chance for young people in the region, I think, to join us in our endeavors. I've kept quiet all day. It's very hard. I said so many things I wanted to say, but I listened to Safia when she gave me the orders to just listen, and I think I learned a lot by listening. I'm not a poet, but I like the Somali poetic form, where a poet will say, I've got 3 bad things that everyone should know, and 3 good things, or 3 warnings. I'm going to sort of sing 3 brief praises of the conference, and then offer 3 challenges for the future, if I can do that. First of all, of course, thanks to Safia and all of the organizers, and to all of you. The first interesting praise came this morning when I listened to the panel on orality and orature as method. And I had read the papers, carefully, but I wasn't very, I wasn't enthused. I mean, I said, yes, they're good papers, but if I hadn't come, I wouldn't have heard all of the oral presentations. I wouldn't have engaged with the storytelling that really had me writing like crazy here, making notes, making connections in my mind. I wish I had the time to say some things about it. So there's something about the use of orature to talk about ideas and to recall things that parents told you, or that experiences people had, or encounters in their jobs that that bring to life the issues that are raised. And I thought, so that's something I hope we can continue, and maybe we could talk about having a working papers or online exchange of some sort to continue this, because it's a shame we didn't have enough time to just spill out all of our responses to those presentations. And every panel was like that. I mean, I think the oral sources, the value of a symposium where we can sit down and hear people present their ideas, even if they only have 15 minutes, is brilliant and really excited me. The second praise is that I'm really excited to see so much good scholarship going on and so many young people engaged in new work, as well as revisiting old work, and especially history, of course. I love history, so I'm glad to see there are some historians here. History, as we know, as we heard today, is not just good for, it's good therapy and good healing. It's a good way to preserve and disseminate to young folks who might not even be aware. All they know is the history of the last 25 years, to realize there's a deeper and longer history, and also to create useful pasts, which we haven't got time to talk about, but I love creating useful pasts, and we can maybe reflect on that a little more. And the third thing I think we did achieve what Ali called for in his opening remarks, that the Adan studies, which was kind of the driver maybe of this planning, really has begun, I think, and we can see it in the presentations, to de-ghettoize Somali studies. We've had so many people talking about Yoruba ethnogenesis and international humanitarianism, and so Somali studies, at least on many of the, much of what I heard, is really situating itself in larger global issues. I think that's really important. And we have reversed or begun to reverse the gaze, another thing you called for, where the scrutinizers of Somalis are now being scrutinized. I feel like I'm one of them, and I'm glad. It's long overdue, really, and so I thank you all for doing that. Just one other, I'll give you one metaphor that I have here now, and that is, I think what's going on here is we have a new architecture, being designed for Somali studies, with a wider vision and with more planners and maybe more builders who haven't been involved in the past in designing agendas. I think that's what you're doing, you and your team are doing. We don't yet know whether the content or the layout of the apartments or the topics within this new design, how much fruit they'll bear. Invariably, they'll have to use some material, building material from previous residents, perhaps, of Somali studies, and layouts which have been shown to be useful avenues into our institution, and contents which may borrow some contents from earlier work. We can't assume that the new structure, the new architecture, will satisfy all aspirations or answer all questions, but it's still worth building, and I think that's the value of this beginning. Now, the challenges, just 3 brief challenges. One is, again, going back to the orature and to the fact that we've got to start listening to other narratives other than the conventional ones and the ones that have dominated our understanding of historical and political processes. The question I was going to raise this morning, if I'd had time, would have been, our storytellers, those who are going to the oral sources, are they going to be any more likely or less likely to be able to challenge stereotypes and hierarchies? The oral tradition itself is as we saw in the presentations today, can reinforce inequalities, right? It can reinforce exclusions. So I think, like everything in Somali studies and like every intellectual tool, the oral tradition or the tradition of orature is a double-edged sword always. It can sustain traditions that we would like to overthrow, and it can also be an avenue for constant innovation. And so we have to keep that in mind. So the challenge is to scrutinize ourselves too, as we challenge the conventional narratives, to kind of, to obviously interrogate our own, interrogate interrogate the subaltern stories as well. The second thing, second challenge is, are we paying enough attention? I just listening to the very last presentation on the last panel by Ahmed on the Islamic courts reminded me that I'm always afraid. I always tell my students this. I don't think we listen enough or pay enough attention to Islamic discourses about the issues we're talking about, discourses that happen within an Islamic educational world, things that might have to do with not just with politics, but with, well, good governance, social justice, economic justice, right? Finance and business. How do you conduct business? What does it mean to be an educated and involved citizen? So I think it's important, especially for those academics who are really making their mark in secular institutions, not to leave out that discourse and those traditions that operate maybe outside of our everyday world. Everyone gives lip service to the fact that one pillar of Somali identity is Islamic one, but it needs to really, I think we need to really engage it seriously and take it seriously as a secular solutions coming out of the West or out of the Western Academy don't have all the answers to some of these issues. And finally, I really enjoyed this challenge of thinking about whether, as someone said this morning, might have been Howard, might have been, maybe it was Safia, saying that we have to theorize before we can really start the real job of research, of new research. We have to destabilize the old models and the old assumptions before we can sort of bring in new ones. I'm not so sure. Historians are empiricists, kind of. We don't like models to precede data. Because then you find data that fit your model. So I'm really would hope that we still keep talking to elders and to refugees and to the young and to people, hearing from them, learning from them, getting new data and getting it out on the internet or in print. So we have source material from the generation that's going to be leaving us soon. We've really got to collect this stuff and have it there, and collect data as we're rethinking the way to use that data. You know what I mean? So I'm that's challenge to you is that I see that I'm posing to you is let's not just theorize. Let's do the hard work of collecting new material. With that, I think I am done. Thanks.
Sitting on this panel, it's hard not to think to myself, what on earth am I doing on this panel? And that's to be fair to the legacies that I feel I learned that I was a part of today, and the legacies of knowledge production that I feel that I'm contributing to. I want to read a really quick quote by Frantz Fanon from his speech to the Black African Writers Association in 1957, which I think really encapsulates my entire experience having begun and started a PhD, and why I began it, and my process of really uncovering oral traditions and storytelling. So he says at this conference, the oral tradition, stories, epics, and songs of the people, which formerly were filed away as set pieces, are now beginning to change. This is in 1957. The storytellers who used to relate inert episodes now bring them alive and introduce into them modifications which are increasingly fundamental. There's a tendency to bring conflicts up to date and to modernize the kinds of struggles which the stories evoke, together with the names of heroes and the types of weapons. The method of illusion is more and more widely used. The formula, quote, "This all happened long ago," I think Somalis say, is substituted by that of what we are going to speak of happened somewhere else, but it might well have happened here today, and it might happen tomorrow. The example of Algeria is significant in this context. From 1952 to 53 onwards, the storytellers who were before that time stereotyped and tedious to listen to completely overturned their traditional methods of storytelling and the contents of their tales. Their public, which was formerly scattered, became compact. The epic, with its typified categories, reappeared. It became an authentic form of entertainment, which took on once more a cultural value. Colonialism made no mistake when, from 1955 on, it proceeded to arrest these storytellers systematically. And I think this is exactly how I saw the way that Adan studies erupted a year ago in April. It was last year, April, the way it erupted. And Fanon is really known for sort of connecting the violence of colonialism to the psyche and the impact that it has on the psyche. So make no mistake, what happened and what began last April was evidence of epistemic violence, the systematic and willful attempt to erase the role that Somalis have in producing knowledge about themselves and putting that knowledge out into different spaces. Being here, and I give all credit to Safia, and she doesn't want constant attention put on her, but she deserves all the credit, and the organizers of this conference, for bringing us together at one of the epicenters of Western knowledge production. I mean, who knew a year ago from now that we would be debating these themes and these topics together and in solidarity at an institution like Harvard University? So at the end of all of this, I'm reflecting on the legacy of Somali studies. I've learned a lot about the past and how so much of the different panels and the papers that were presented are theorized the past and the position that even the researcher, those that are presenting, have, and the relationship that they have to the research that they're presenting. And I also understand and see that Somali studies is very interdisciplinary. We all come from different disciplines and different backgrounds, but we're here contributing to a particular kind of knowledge production and making that knowledge more easily accessible, whatever the medium it is that we're trying to spread it in. So let me for a moment speak to my peers. So those that, just to feel relatable. So those that are, in Western academic institutions, those that are PhD candidates now, those that are emerging scholars, those that contribute to knowledge production in all its forms, not just in academia, locate your past. Your presence and your present is not, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Why you choose to study what you study, why you choose to present your research or your identity, because we talked about Somali Nimo here as well. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it contributes to knowledge production in different ways. And once you are seated firmly and unequivocally in your truth, whatever that may be, because we've talked about how truth is malleable and there are multiplicity of truths that exist, then it becomes very difficult for anyone to enact epistemic violence onto you. And if it does happen, as it did happen last April, then we're going to respond. And we might do it at Harvard. I'm hoping we can do it next in Toronto. Yay to my Canadian contingent. But the idea is that there's a critical consciousness that's emerged. Let's not take that for granted. Let's use that to continue to push forward and take ourselves and the research that we do very seriously, to add to the legacy that you've begun for us and to see ourselves a part of that ontology. So yeah, that's in brief.
So it just needs to sit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, and yes, thank you to Safia and team
It's really humbling to sit here and be part of a panel with Hussein Tanzania. So I'm honored. Ali, Hussein, Cassanelli, Lidwien, absolutely, and to also have this cross-generational presence as well with Siham and Safia. It's fascinating. I remember when I first spoke to Safia saying, "You are it. You're Somali studies for me because you're the young scholar who's studying Somali political, historical things." And then, you know, Adan studies erupted. Adan is becoming such a now an English word. It's, you know, and for me, I remember my daughter, youngest daughter, heard me say hashtag Adan studies, and it was the first time I used hashtag. And she was like, "Did you just say hashtag?" And I was like, well, didn't even register what she was trying to pinpoint, but she was just floored that mommy was using hashtag now. So a lot has happened since then, but we knew, and I think we were in York University also when I was saying this yes came to a head last April, but it was coming. What I also would like to do is just, you know, you have so many ideas, and I wanted so many times to just comment on what was presented today. Incredible body of knowledge, but the diversity and the debunking of the one Somali, one nation, one people, and of course one supreme leader, as the African, you know, post-colonial genre went. You know, just deconstructing that and taking that apart was very much alive today and visible since yesterday. Knowledge, I think we are, you know, there has been knowledge production always, but I think what we are witnessing, in addition to the multiplicity of ways of knowing, is also the idea of knowledge exchange. That, you know, as you do all the PhD readings that you do realize what you know is limited. And it's encounters like this and exchanges of ideas that kind of have that light bulb moment of transferring them that knowledge into something more tangible, contextualizing that information and making it a knowledge. And of course, having that continuity and disrupting, you know, what is considered to be knowledge in ways of knowing and multiple ways of knowing. So incredible. Contextualizing. Knowledge is not knowledge until you put it in a context and it becomes relevant. And, you know, having that and sort of even looking at the diversity within the Somali territories, whether it is geopolitical, whether it's history, whether it's just the geographical location of our beloved homeland, which has been subjected to all kinds of variable, sometimes kind, sometimes unkind exposures throughout its evolution. Just to kind of hear Iman talk about, you know, because we grew up with the SYL being the end and be it all of, you know, Somali nationalism, just to kind of unearth some of the things that were happening in that era. Brings to mind, you know, Bazanchi's novel. There was a sort of comical novel that talked about No New Lands, looking at immigrant communities from South Asia and from the Caribbean, all kind of Indian ancestry in Toronto. Everybody talking about where they came from, and then saying we're in a new country, but you just bring who you are. You could be in a new land, but it's really nothing new. You are bringing those legacies, you're bringing forward. So as much as it is sort of like, wow, too many aha moments, there is, again, no new lands, right? We know what this is. And I'm excited to be part of this juncture of kind of seeing Somali studies come to a place where, you know, Somalis are not just knowledge consumers anymore. You know, we are now knowledge producers. We have always been, but I think within the realms of having, you know, people talk about orality today at Harvard and kind of bringing that paradigm shift that you talked about, that critical thinking, I think it's really incredible moment because, you know, nothing new, things were happening, but I think we have pushed it within from the margins into the mainstream, and it's an exciting time to be part of, and the future can be whatever we kind of want it to be. But I would want to see the proceedings, to have that record, whatever form they can be available at. I'm glad there was some recording happening, but also, you know, I want to also say the challenge for me is what next and where next and when. So with that, thank you very much for all this.
So I could just say Somali studies is in good hands. Geediga wada, yeah? Keep it going. But I have to earn my lunch. So I will say a few more things. So I used to say to people in the last 10 years, I of course teach at an undergraduate institution, and if people ask me for advice, I said, listen, one thing, don't think that you can do Somali studies only from within Somali studies. So with Somali sources, obviously, but not from within Somali studies. And of course, you have done more than that. You've all brought relevant theories to the themes that you're studying, to your sources, and you have used your Somali sources to make theory. I'm looking at Mr. Abu Maya there in particular, right? Which, of course, in some sense, the moment you begin to read Somali sources, things happen in your head, right? Because they do speak and they do provide theoretical frameworks and others. So gone, that's one you have already down pat too, and not because I used to say it to a few people. So now I want to say something about sources because I'm thrown back now on what I am doing also these days. I've gone back to primary sources. In the last year, I've been working on sources from Brava, in particular the Qadish court records, which are in Arabic, but also some Chimini religious poetry with my colleagues, Andres Alessandra Vianello and Mohamed Qasim. It's not something I could do by myself. So I'd like to say something about sources. So I'm very impressed with how you all have kind of, how you all are theorizing colonialism in terms of how it destroys knowledge, in terms of how it transforms in multiple negative ways. And that can never be bracketed, and I think you foreground it in a very important way. What I think, though, that may be worth mentioning, that the Somali, let me see, get my thought. What I am worried, not worried about, what I think I see is that I do not think that there are colonial sources and pure Somali oral sources. So the pure oral sources, the ones that are in Somali, have also come to us through colonial context. And this is, I think, just something, keep that in mind. And actually, I think it is an advantage because now you have a Somali oral text and you have a colonial context and you rub things together. And rubbing things together usually brings sparks of insight. So I don't think there is an original pure Somali oral tradition that you can now just go back to or interpret. I don't think anybody did that, but I may have seen a few nostalgic hopes that that might be possible. And then the second thing I think, which is probably also, you quoted very powerfully how you have been misrepresented as Somali by the colonial powers. But I would also like to remind us, Somalis have always talked back and have, not in an equal partnership, but have also shaped colonialism, have shaped colonial sources. And I think, therefore, just as we have to decode colonial context to go to those things that come to us in Somali and we think are, therefore, uncontaminated, right? They are of crucial importance, but let's decode the context around them. So I think we can I don't know whether I want to use retrieve. I've not had a lot of time to think. We can find maybe even traces of Somali agency and Somali shaping of the colonial. I have been so bold as to say someplace that when we were talking about Lewis before, that I think what Lewis was documenting in the late colonial period, that by then there already is a colonial synthesis, particularly in Somaliland, possibly also in the south, where what is seen as Somali custom has already been shaped in this colonial encounter. And therefore, I think there are some fantastic opportunities in the colonial sources. I will give you one story. It's very brief. This is a moment where a colonial ship captain, so we're still in the treaty period, comes to a local Somali leader and tries to twist his arm to sign a treaty of protection. And in the story of the ship captain, he says, well, the guy doesn't want to, he really refuses. And then he said, but listen, we are here to protect you. You need protection. And the chief answers, what do you mean? I mean, this is, of course, not the Benadir towns, right? Where there was a lot at stake if you put a bomb, a cannon boat on it. This was a less developed, less urbanized area. And the local leader says, what do you mean you need to protect us? If there's a problem at the coast, we go inland. We have everything we need. And then the guy is really desperate because he has to go back to Aidid. The monsoon is going to set in. And he says, well, at least sign a treaty that you will not sign a treaty with anybody else but us. And the guy says, why don't you go back to your sovereign and say that that's not how we do business. If I tell you I won't sign a treaty with somebody else, you can take that to your sovereign. Right? So meaning this is a Somali agency. And by the way, they end up signing a treaty. Yeah, so we have to deal with some real geopolitical and political economic connections. But we can really find, I think, therefore, a Somali agency in the colonial sources. And I think that there is a mer à boire, there is a sea to drink there. Okay, then a final thing that I had kind of prepared some things that I've thrown by the wayside in the course of today. I would like to quote Janet Hobson's Body as Evidence, Mediating Race, Globalizing Gender. And she criticizes the urge to embrace the post-racial. And therefore, let's say, the fact that we may not need advanced studies so that we don't have to criticize whiteness. Yeah? She criticizes the urge to embrace the post-racial, for this is actually a way of dismissing the identity categories that enable social movements and cultural change. So if we say, okay, we don't need Somaliness, we don't need whiteness, we don't need these conceptual categories, maybe you are undermining the identity categories that enable social movements and cultural change. And I think it rhymes very much with what Ali was saying in the beginning about Du Bois. Now, so meaning hang on to those identities, their identities of struggle, is what she's saying. And then I would like to quote somebody else, and this comes part from my prep, Roderick Ferguson, the reorder of things, the university and its pedagogies of minority difference. And this person warns and writes, institutionalization for radical social and intellectual movements was never a simple and innocent cause for celebration. You get the tension between it. You have to hang on to identities and struggle through them, is one idea. But the other is, be careful. The neoliberal university may want to co-opt your difference for its own purposes. And so as you break open that door and meet, at the center of Western knowledge production, at the same time, keep an eye on this idea that you're being co-opted and are being used, for the neoliberal university to look really diverse. And people have talked about multiculturalism as a Canadian government project. I think are already very aware of that. And I would like to just end with a saying, Somalida waxay oran jirtay, awr kala tagaa mahuma ur kala tagaa hum. Yeah. So when camels part, there's no problem. But when hearts part, there's a problem. I would be lying if I did not feel that hearts have parted in the context of writing about the Civil War. And I think that this is therefore also maybe a new beginning for bringing the ur back together, even though the hour will separate again. Thank you.
I hope I'll be brief because whatever I was going to say has already really been said. And I had my say yesterday to a certain extent. But now, I think the panel, and I go back to what Lee was saying in terms of storytelling, which is always really very important. And what you were saying also, Lidwien, and you were saying in terms of from Fanon, it's always problematic in the sense that there is a place where Clifford Geertz says the story a culture tells about itself. You have to really be very careful of what that story is all about. But at the same time, also, without telling your story, you sort of really become a non-existent human being, in the sense that imagine storytelling by its very nature. You look at the Arabian Nights, 1001. You look at the Shahrazad. The only way that she could really survive, basically, was by telling stories. But at the same time, as humans, we know that, you know, at the most I could live. My father lived until he was 101 years old when he passed away. So if I'm lucky, I could reach 100. But I know I'll be leaving the place. Now, the best way to sort of really defy death is by telling stories at the same time. So in that sense, I think it really becomes important to tell stories and to theorize, because theory by its very nature, just think, the etymology of the word theory from the Greek is theo, T-H-E-O, which literally means to see. And Hussein was born in Tanzania, but there is a group of people, when they tell stories, they always say see to the storyteller. They'll say see so that we may see. That's what they say, which literally means that it's embedded already, inscribed in telling stories, the idea of vision to begin with. So they say see so that we may see. Now, of course, orature, as it's called now, oral literatures and all these sort of things, is really problematic. But at the same time, also, as I was saying before, it is important. It is important if you take into account two important things about orature: the poetics of orature and the noetics of orature. The poetics, which literally means a system of articulation; noetics means a system of knowledge. If you think along those lines, then you will literally be theorizing really the idea of orature. Of course, in the case of East Africa, Uganda, Saramuga was the one who came up with the word orature itself. You have Taban Loliyong, you have Okot Pipitek, you have Gugi Wathiongo, and it goes on and on and on. So we have to sort of really tap into this. But even in the case of Somalis, imagine if I said, for example, to my good friend here, Lidwien, ma'immak laysa. Just imagine, ma'immak laysa. Of course, she can hear me, I know, but the idea is, no. But the idea is, do you understand me? It's as though someone who has ham radio, who says, do you read me, kind of. And it's that sort of comprehension which really becomes important. Otherwise, if we talk at cross purposes, then there is no conversation really to begin with. Now, in terms of course, storytelling, when we talk about it has a bifurcate sort of function in what is called the Horatian elements of storytelling after Horace, which literally means entertainment and instruction. And we have to sort of really find a balance. Now, Mohamed today, I think, talking about the anecdotal sort of stories that are interjected in say, theory writing, for example. And it's really interesting because there is a criticism that's lodged against postmodernists. You are going against them, but it's lodged against them for that same reason, that they bring those anecdotal sort of stories into that make part of the account. Now, I think it was Hoden, someone who talked about the denial of coevalness, coevality, which comes from Johannes Fabian, Time and Its Other. He has now a good book actually called, he talks about madness and that sort of thing. But even there, I think it's really important. Why do colonialists sort of really deny non-Western societies and cultures this idea of co-equality. And we could sort of analyze all these sorts of things. Now, in the case of Somalis, though, and this is what Lidwien was saying, there was always what's called contestation, especially when you talk about contestation in the Spanish language. It's contestación, which literally means talking back. So there was, even though perhaps the colonialist was trying to subvert it at times, to domesticate it perhaps, there was that sort of really talking back. Now, when we talk about colonialism and post-colonialism, I think the Somalis have a problem, which really captures this. أيحتك النريد. Just think about it. أيحتك, which they say, don't be fooled by the migration of the locust, they leave their larvae behind. So the larva will, and it will perpetuate. So the Somalis also really thought along those sort of realms a long time ago. I think it's a question of, in a way, understanding what the Somalis were saying, and in a way, also taking them to task. The question of, in terms of writing about the Civil War, I think it's really, again, we are talking about contestations in the sense that, think about it, it's a question of priority, which is not really simply about Somalis. You look at Ireland, for example. Seamus Dean has a good sort of analysis of this, where he talks about the question of priority and all these sorts of things. Now, the idea of, for example, I remember reading Mohamed, our good friend's writing, where when he was talking about Hizbiyah, and the Hizbiyah, before it was called Hizbiyah Dastur al-Istiqlal, HDM, yeah, al-Mustaqil, exactly, HDM. Now, later, before actually it was Hizbi Digil Mirif, you see. And what they argued for in those days, during the transition, yes, they argued, the Rayale argued for basically federalism. Just imagine. No, but nonetheless, federalism. Now, 40 years later, 60 years later, we are going back to square one. And we are saying now we want federalism. Exactly what they were talking about at that particular. No, seriously.
Different kind of federalism.
No.
So if you go there, then we have to be precise. But no. I know. Just note my position.
But yes. So noted, please. No. But so let me just. I think what becomes important for this has been a wonderful, really, and it's thanks to Safia. And I don't think we have thanked her enough. She and her team, no, seriously. And now I think we have also put on notice all those, the naysayers. And thanks to even though I don't want him to become our poster boy, no. Mark said, no, it's not worth it, really. But thanks to him, in a way, we have now put something in motion, and may this really continue. Because if it doesn't, we will.
Or in spite of him.
Or in spite of him, perhaps. But I hope I say to Safia through Abdulatif, there is a place in Nuruddin Farih's novel, A Naked Needle, that people do not really read these days because it's out of print, but which is really important, where Nuruddin talks about Epsom salt. And he says the Somalis are like Epsom salt. And then the froth goes out, and we go different ways. May that not be the case. So let this be a challenge. Yeah. And thank you, Safia, again.
A footnote. I want to make a footnote. It's a tragic footnote, and I won't leave it that way. I'll spell out, my nature, I'll be frank. In 2002, my wife had a brain aneurysm. She emerged in a coma. She has been in a coma from that day until today as I speak to you. We are taking care of her at home. It's important for you to know because it has influenced my productivity. I have canceled many trips. That's why I missed the Congress in Denmark, Norway, and the last one in Finland. So if in Hargeisa you don't find me there, you will understand what is happening. That's all.
Okay, so it is 6 o'clock now. We've all been here since, most of you have been here since 9 a.m. It was a packed house from the first panel, which is, I mean, in all my years at Harvard, and this is where we do our weekly African Studies workshop. This is where the history seminars take place. I have never seen this room full at 9 a.m. This is, so that's impressive. So I'm not going to have questions. However, I'm sure people will kind of be lingering around. You can talk afterwards. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here, for the incredible amount of support that we've had, for really, I mean, and this is the type of thing you want to happen as a graduate student. You know what I mean? It's energized me in so many ways. It's energized, I think, so many of us who are studying, you know, at the moment, doing our research. It's energized people who were on the brink of thinking about going to PhDs. I've gotten, you know, notes from many students saying, now I want to do a PhD in Somali studies. So just the fact that we have been able to do that collectively, I think has been incredible. I know many people have also joined us digitally. So it's great to also be part of then this wider space as well. So I just wanted to say it's an honor to be able to do this here, to be able to do this in my academic home, and to be able to share that with all of you. And again, I hope that this continues, and may this be the first of many other workshops of this kind, inshallah. I mean, thank you.